So welcome back to Wealth and Christ podcast. Today we have Feyisola Ogunfemi, who is a strong believer in Christ, who's also a strong coach, business owner. She's very talented in the weather industry. Well, so today we're going to talk about her journey to being one of the top dogs in the weather industry world. So Feyisola, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for inviting me. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's great to connect. Many years ago, I used to attend the same church as you, and that was also the same place where I gave my life to Christ. So a lot of things happened from that. It's definitely cool to reconnect, and thanks for inviting me on the podcast.
No problem. So, and I did a little background research on you. I realized that you was an engineer, then you transitioned to wedding planner. What made that decision? Like, what made that change for you from engineer?
I did study computer engineering in undergrad. I went to University of Pennsylvania. I chose to go down the path of engineering because I wanted to do more than what was traditionally expected of a woman type of thing. And that was like ever since I was 5. I always knew I wanted to go to a field, literally kindergarten. I made that decision. I wanted to go into a field that was traditionally male dominated and just show that I could do it. When I was in kindergarten, I went to a Catholic school, and the sister, the nun who was in charge of my class, told us that the first Black woman went to space, and that it was a big deal because that's not a job that women normally do.
Mhm.
And because at first when she said it, I was like, okay, but then she had, when you're 5, you got to explain things to people. Like it's a big deal because women don't normally go to space, and I was like, well, I want to do something that women don't normally do. So that's when I started thinking about science, technology. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. First, I was a doctor, then I wanted to be an architect. Like I kind of went around a few different things. And then I kind of settled on wanting to be an engineer because I really enjoyed physics. Funny, I chose an engineering discipline that has nothing to do with physics, but it was in physics class when I decided that's when I wanted to be an engineer. And in college, I really wanted to go to Penn. When I visited, I was like, I really love this school, but they didn't have architectural engineering. So I had to decide to either commit to being an architect, which I know I wasn't sure. One thing is I kind of knew I wasn't sure what I wanted to be when I grew up, but I kind of was making decisions. So I didn't want to box myself into being an architect. So instead, I decided to go to engineering undecided. And then as I was going through the path, I decided on computer engineering because every kind of engineer needs a computer engineer.
Yeah.
So it's my way of still not making the decision while deciding on a path that could bring me money while I was still figuring out what I wanted to do in life. So that was a big thing there. After college, I moved to New York City. I did a beauty pageant, the Miss Nigeria Independence pageant, and we rehearsed at CAC, which is the church
Wow.
so that's where rehearsal was. And there were 3 other people in the pageant who attended CAC. So not only did I rehearse there, but I got to know them. Now I hadn't necessarily given my life to Christ at the moment. I wouldn't say I was like the worst person in the world, but I also wasn't. I mean, I grew up Christian, but I just hadn't made that personal decision for myself. And I was just kind of doing my own thing. But a couple of them invited me to church, a couple of people I was in the pageant with. So I came to the church and I attended probably for about a month before I have finally had my own encounter and really gave my life to Christ. Now, for the next year, I was still the pageant queen and I wanted to do something with the pageant queen. I didn't want to just be the queen that was just the winner and then she disappeared. So I wanted to do something with it. And I planned this service project. So I planned a scholarship fundraiser. I wanted to give it to 2 girls, one who's in high school, one who's in college. And whatever I raised, I wanted to give to them. And I wanted it to be a big ball. I wanted it to be something that everybody came to, everybody donated to. And people did donate. I didn't get as much attendance as I would have liked, but a lot of people sent me money, whether they came or not. And so I was able to give more than what I planned to for each of the scholarships, which was great. But the problem is that when that fundraiser was over, because again, I spent all my time outside of work working on this fundraiser. And when that was over, it was the first time literally in my life that I didn't have a creative outlet where I wasn't, all through college, I was in a dance team. I was also a choreographer. So coming up with choreography, coming up with lighting cues, because you have to come up with everything for yourself, come up
Yeah.
with lighting cues for the performances. I was on my house council. So I used to plan our Thanksgiving gala every year. I've always done creative things. We planned mini conferences and all that stuff. And that was the first time that it was just like, okay, you're done. Once the fundraiser was over, it was just like I was literally done. And it was just me and my IT consulting job. And that's when I realized, like, I really don't like, not that I don't like IT. At first I didn't know what was going on. I thought, oh, I hate my job. Then I started realizing I actually don't hate my job. Like, my job is actually cool. The people I work with are fine. It's challenging me. I'm growing, but something's missing. And that's when I started realizing that, like, I'm a creative person and I actually have a desire to always have some sort of creative outlet. I had been doing all these things all these years because, they always tell you to be busy. It's good for your resume. It's good for trying to get into colleges, but I always enjoyed it too. But I just never considered it as a career path. So after a lot of soul searching and a lot of praying, which was great that I had recently given my life to Christ, a lot of praying, someone asked me a question: if money wasn't an issue, what would you do? And I said, I would absolutely be an event planner. And I'm like, but I would be broke, because I just couldn't imagine somebody spending more than $2,000 on an event planner, because I wasn't educated in that area. And so the person said, well, you're young, you're 23. Like, you're 23. Like, you could literally do whatever you want. And if it doesn't work out, you can change your mind again. So I enrolled in NYU at night and on nights and weekends, and I took a certification program. It took me about a year to complete, and then I started my business, and I just kind of kept running from there. So it really was just like a series of things. I think that a lot of times people expect this big bang approach, but a lot of times you kind of find out what you're meant to do in the process of doing other things and just trying things. Because the pageant was something that I just tried. I was never the pageant girl. I was never really interested in pageants for a long time. I really only did the pageant just to get to know people in New York. That's the honest truth. And I wasn't until about halfway through when I was like, oh, I actually kind of want to win. But I didn't enter with the intention of winning, weirdly enough. I entered because I was like, it's a great way to get to know people and like kind of put myself out there. And so I don't know. I kind of feel like a lot of times you kind of find your purpose in doing stuff. And a lot of times when people are like sitting in their house and they're like, God, tell me what my purpose is. Like, that's not how it works. You have to get out there and do things. And as you're doing things, more will be revealed to you over time.
That's good. So my next question: how did fate play a role in your journey as a wedding planner, event planner? Like, how big was fate for you?
It definitely played a role, because I think for myself, and I don't know how many people who listen to this podcast are African or who are immigrants, but my parents are immigrants, and they did a lot to come here, to give us, everything, Funny enough, I'm the first child. When I told them I wanted to go into engineering, they didn't want me to, because they were like, oh, everything's getting outsourced to China, but that's not entirely true. So they were nervous about me going down that path. They just wanted me to be a doctor at first. But once they started seeing me get internships and stuff, and they started seeing like, oh, you could really have success as an engineer, then they were excited about it. And then literally, that's what all my brothers did as well, and still do. And we all kind of went down that path, and they were happy with it. So it's kind of hard. I did happen to go to, like an Ivy League school, all of that, to do all of that and then graduate and be like, I want to plan events, like, it's just like, it's a very, it almost, when I told my parents that, I was nervous, because I was just like, it feels like I'm throwing all of this away, all of this that they've invested into me and all of the expectations that they wanted for me. It feels like I'm just throwing it away. So it's not, for me, it's not something that I went into lightly. And it also isn't something, to be transparent, that I just went into and just quit my job and jumped into event planning, because I don't think that's wise. That's actually why a lot of businesses die, because people think the first step to starting a business is quitting your job.
Yeah.
It's like the first step is actually figuring out how to make money and figuring out how to market yourself and all that, which you can do while having a job, because it takes a while. Most businesses take 3 years to be profitable, 3 to break even. So if the first thing you do is quit your job, what are you doing for the next 3 years? I mean, if you're happy to live at home with your parents for the next 3 years, no traveling, no extra spending money, then that's cool. Or if you're married and your spouse will support you, that's fine. Otherwise, that's not the first step to starting a business, right? So for myself, that wasn't even my concern. My concern wasn't even, like whatever. It was just, I was nervous about what my parents would feel about the fact that we'd had all those arguments about me becoming an engineer instead of a doctor, and they invested all this money in my education and all that. And now I'm saying I want to do something else. But the funny thing is that my parents actually were cool with it. My dad, the only thing he said was just, give yourself at least 2 years before you quit your job, because for the same reasons that I just said. But they were just like, try things, life is too short to always wonder what would have been. So for me, the reason I'm starting with all this, when you asked me, did faith play a role? I was scared when I had that initial epiphany of, if money wasn't an issue, I would be an event planner. But then I was like, but I would be broke. So it was like, I was afraid. I was like, there's no point in pursuing this. And of course, for me, the next step to pursuing it was for me, not everybody needs, I'm not saying everybody needs to go to NYU or whatever, but for me, that was the right next step for me because I was 23 years old. And I probably look 23 right now. Like I still have a baby face. Who's gonna hire me with no events experience, or at least I thought I had no events experience. I later realized I did from all the things I had been doing prior. But who's gonna hire me this young? Like I need something under my belt. And so I wanted that certification, which meant I was gonna spend more money, right? Spend money out of my pocket to get this certification, spend extra time on evenings and weekends to go to school and all this. And so it was just like, is this the right decision? Am I wasting time? Am I wasting money? I had all these fears. But the truth is that when I prayed about it, I had peace. And I think that the truth is that when there's sometimes that God will tell you do this, and there's sometimes that God will allow you to do things. And I think that this was a case of God allowing me to do it. It wasn't a case where God was like, or maybe it was God telling me to do it because I really was unsettled. When I say at that period when I realized when that pageant was that event was over, I was very unsettled for months. For a few months, like I was very unhappy, and I couldn't. It took me a long time to figure out why. Like there was something on the inside that was just like. It just took me a while to unpack my feelings, understand what was going on. And when I finally decided I was going to move forward, like, okay, let me enroll in NYU. That was when I started having peace again. And so for me, it was just like, okay, let me follow God. There's a scripture that says goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And there's a guest pastor at my church once said, goodness and mercy can't follow if you're not moving. And so it was one of those things where it was just like, I felt like God allowed me to explore this. And in retrospect, I really feel like God kind of led me down this path. It wasn't even like whatever, because especially with everything I was feeling on the inside, it was a lot. And I think that I was really getting to understand who God was. I was really getting to understand what it sounded like for God to speak to me. Because when I gave my life to Christ, there was no altar call on the day I gave my life to Christ. It was just, for whatever reason, it was a very long, extended worship session. Like I said, I hadn't graduated from college too long before that. So I actually was coming from my homecoming. So I was in Philadelphia. And the whole time I was there, everything kept telling me, like, you need to take the first bus on Sunday morning out and go to church. And I didn't know why, because it's not like church was going anywhere, but it was just, it was my desire. It wasn't even like, it was just my desire to be there. And I didn't know why. So I just started to follow it, It was even my desire to find a church, and I didn't know why, because like I said, I hadn't given my life to Christ yet. Yeah. So I started learning what it meant to follow these desires and see what happens from it. So it wasn't like me choosing to become an event planner was the first time that I learned to listen to God's voice. I was learning it. So I was getting more comfortable with it. And it's just something that, I've kind of learned over time, that sometimes you do kind of have to step out. Sometimes God, wants you to move. Like there are even some times in the Bible where Moses was crying out to God, and God's like, why are you crying out to me? Use the staff that's in your hand. Like that was his response. And to me, I'm like, well, I mean, he's asking you for help, but it's just like sometimes God is like, don't ask me. Use what's in your hand, right? Try it, give it a try, and know that I will be with you. And so that for me was kind of where faith took played a part. And I think that if I had not given my life to Christ prior to all of this happening, I probably would have been confused, and I probably would have never tried it, to be honest. I probably would have been like, oh, this is crazy. This is a crazy idea. Let me just ignore it. And then now 10 years later, probably miserable and wondering, what would have been if I had never tried it, right? I would have not had the courage to try it.
That's pretty interesting. So I guess you mentioned your oldest child, you're female. So how would you encourage, a young girl, a young person who wants to be an entrepreneur, whether it's when to plan or how to go about, especially in this kind of age?
I would definitely say, for young girls or guys, I think the advice would be pretty much the same, for me, because again, I'm also the only girl. So the people I give advice to in my family are all men. But I do feel that one thing I've heard over and over again, which I didn't see it that way at the time that I was doing it, but I've heard over and over again when people say, I like the fact that you had the courage to pursue what you wanted. And I've heard it so many times. And then I also see so many times where people are very unhappy in their jobs, which is honestly, there are times I'm unhappy in my business too. So even though there's there's a lot of times people think entrepreneurship is all rosy, but it's not. Like you're everything. You are the accounting office, the marketing department, you are everything. So there are going to be parts of that you don't like. So it's never perfect or rosy on any side. But I'm just saying that there are people who maybe are not necessarily fully fulfilled in their jobs or in their lives. Because I don't think all fulfillment comes from what you do. It comes from your family, it comes from your hobbies, it comes from all that. I don't think what you do should be the center of your life. But I think I've heard so many times where people say, I love the fact that you had the courage to go after what you wanted. And I never saw it that way, largely because for the majority of the time, I also had a job. I had a job and a business for the majority of the time that I've been doing this, But it's crazy that in the midst of that, and I wouldn't say that I talk about it all the time, like, because I don't treat my business like a side hustle. So because of that, it's not like, I never treat it like a side hustle. And I don't like when people do. There's some people who are full-time who treat their businesses like side hustles. So that's a whole nother thing. It's more a frame of mind than anything else. But I feel that would be it. I would say never be afraid to try new things, because the truth of the matter, which is one thing that I don't feel like people talk about enough. It's something that I learned in IT consulting, largely because when you join a consulting firm, when you first join, you don't specialize in anything. But over time, the more you do certain things, the more you get pigeonholed into that, right? You start and you're it's the first year and you're a general analyst. Then people start to notice, okay, you're really good at testing, right? So then they promote you to be the manager of a bunch of testers, or consultant over a bunch of testers. Then they promote you to be a man. And then next thing you know, you're always going to be a tester.
Yeah.
You're pigeonholed into that thing. It's very difficult to switch from being a manager of testers to being a manager of developers, because people are always going to question, do you understand development enough? Because you spent all these years testing. Mm-hmm. And, it's the same thing with us in life. So it's not that you can't switch, you absolutely can. But when you start to have those curiosities, there's nothing wrong with exploring it. There's nothing wrong, because the truth is you can explore it and hate it. Some years ago, because for me, I always knew, I never felt like, I want to be like in my 60s and 70s still planning events, right? Like I would love to be in the events industry in a different format, but I don't know if a 60-year-old, weddings are trendy, it's a little different when you're at that age, being an event planner. So there was a time that I said, okay, let me buy some chairs. I invested over $12,000 whatever to order Shivari chairs, which are like rental chairs, what a lot of people want for weddings, from China. And I had them in my own stock. And I said, I'm going to start with this. What's most requested is gold Shivari chairs. I'm going to buy a whole bunch of gold Shivari chairs, have them, start renting them out, and just see what happens. And it was horrible. I hated it. And the thing is that it seems so simple that you have products, you ship them out, you stack them, you put it back. It seems so simple, but it was so hard, because I would hire people to help me. They didn't understand. They wouldn't listen when I say stack them in stacks of 6 so it fits. They wouldn't want to listen. So now they decided to do stacks of 4. And then after the fact, they realized, it's not going to fit in the truck. So now we got to do it over again. Like dealing with different things, dealing with all the cleaning, having to clean everything, dealing with the storage unit that's only open at certain times, like all these things. And I started to realize, I can't do this. This is not going to last. So I probably rented Shivari chairs it took me about 6 or 8 months to even get the chairs in the first place, because of customs and all these different things. By the time I started renting it, I only lasted a month and a half. And I was just like, I'm selling it. I'm selling everything. I don't even want this anymore. I don't even want it. And I sold it, and I was happy with I sold it to 2 small venues, and they were very appreciative, because what I sold my chairs to them is way cheaper than what they would have gotten it anywhere else. Although I got my money back, but I wasn't trying to I was just trying to get rid of it. I wasn't trying to make more money off of it. I was very happy with the way everything ended. I didn't lose anything. I didn't lose any money. I didn't, whatever. And I feel good about where I sold the chairs and everything. But I went down the path. I learned it wasn't for me, and I left. Nobody died, like nothing crazy, and even if I did lose a couple $1,000s, yes, that's real money, but that's part of the journey of entrepreneurship, because I have lost money on things in the past that I thought were going to bring me money, right? So it's part of the journey. And so I feel that a lot of times we're so afraid, especially people who are high achievers, especially people who have always gotten straight A's because they've always done the right thing. It becomes difficult to explore. And I was never that person who got straight A's. Started from middle schools, I stopped getting straight A's. Many A's, but definitely I'm not saying that to myself, but there are other people, I think the reason they struggle is that they've always made the right choice. But when it comes to life, the right choice isn't black or white. It depends on the person. And if you struggle with understanding yourself and understanding where you're trying to go, that can be hard, and you end up doing what everybody expects you to be, which is just climbing the corporate ladder, which could be good, but are you climbing the right corporate ladder? Are you in marketing when you should be in tech, or are you in, all those sorts of things? So I would definitely say when you have those curiosities, pray about it and explore them, because the answer will lie there. And if you trust yourself enough, and if you are open to what God is saying to you, you'll learn quickly if you should continue down that path or leave, but you shouldn't be afraid.
Yeah. So you start about profit, going about profit, getting profit. How did that go out for you?
Yeah, so for me, I would say my business didn't take very long before people started knowing who I was, which is very different from making profit, right? I started off doing a lot of like fundraisers. In New York, there are always these fundraisers, events, or whatever. So I started off doing that. I did maybe one or two for free, and then after that, I started charging $200 per event. Then I started charging $500. But by that point, I had started getting hired for weddings. So I started, making more money from that. Now, where I lost a lot of the money was I spent a lot of money on advertising in magazines and stuff like that, which didn't really do anything for me. And then I also spent a lot of money in inventory, buying decorations, right? So I didn't, because I was early in my business and I made a mistake that most event planners make. I thought, ooh, I could rent blue tablecloths, right, for $8 each, or I could just buy them for $10. And then the next time I get a client who wants it, then I make more money because then I'll rent it to them, right? Problem is everybody wants something different. So I continued to just grow inventory, waiting for one day when somebody wants exactly what I have. But it was like people always wanted something slightly different. Like I'd be like, "Oh, I have these gold tablecloths," and they're like, "Well, I kind of like champagne," and I'm like, "It's so close to gold. Just use the gold." And they're like, "No, I want champagne." So it was like, I barely reused anything. The only things I reused were white tablecloths and cylinder vases, but just about everything else was always buying. And so not only was I spending to get the materials, which wasn't so bad, but I was paying monthly on storage for stuff that I didn't even need in the long term. So I spent a lot of money on that. I don't fully regret any of this, because now I coach other wedding planners, and so I can help people to avoid the same mistakes because I've actually walked through it, as opposed to me just saying, "Oh, it's a best practice." I can literally tell you what happens as I was doing this, and I can help other people. But so all that to say, it took a while. When I moved to Maryland, it took a very long time before people started really like recognizing me as an event planner in Maryland. So I did a few events in New York, and then I probably had about a year and a half, almost 2 years of time where I didn't have a lot of events, because I just got tired of driving to New York all the time to plan events, to host events, all that, and while living here. And then it just took a while for my marketing to take off here. So honestly, for me, I would say before I really got like profitable, it was probably about 5 years. It was probably about 5 years. Not to say I never made money before then, but before it was like reliable. Before I got to a place that was reliable. But between me, because when I was in Jersey, I did move right as my business was starting to take off in Jersey. But I believe in doing what's right for me, not just letting my business or my job or whatever else run my life. So I still moved because I wanted to. But that was I would say for me, it probably took closer to 5 years before it was like consistent, where I got to a point where I was like, okay, I can actually like pay myself from my business consistently. It probably took me about 5 years for me to get organized, for me to start noticing what I was doing right versus what I was doing wrong, and all those things. And for me, my whole goal is to make sure that when I'm coaching other wedding planners, it doesn't take them that long, because it doesn't have to if you have the right coach.
That's true. So I guess my next question: did you have a mentor through this whole 5 years process of trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong? Or you just going based on things you know?
I would say the best mentors that I had, the closest thing I had to a mentor would be my father. So my father's an accountant. He's also a financial advisor. So he advised me on certain things, although we all know how it is when it's family sometimes, it's a little bit more emotional. So my dad would give me advice sometimes, but sometimes he would just kind of give me hints and just leave me to figure it out, right? As opposed to it turning into like a heated argument or him telling me, "You need to do this." But there are some things that he said, which at first I kind of brushed off, which I later on realized like he's right. Like my first year in business, he was like, "You're spending way too much money on marketing." Like, he's like, "And what you do is self-marketing as a wedding planner. You don't need to do this." And I was like, "You don't know my industry, blah, blah, blah." And so, but then later I was like, he's actually right. So, I would say my father was probably the closest thing I had to a mentor. I did also do 2 life coaching programs. So I did a life coaching program, and the second was a branding coaching program. So the life coaching program was very good because at the very beginning of when I first built my first business website, everything else in that program. So me just getting clear on what I was trying to do. And the branding coach taught me a lot of things, a lot of certain fundamentals that I still use today about how to market yourself in business, and what branding even means. A lot of people think branding is a logo, and it's not. So it's just like I just got those things. So all of that put together was very, very valuable for me. I think that if I hadn't had those 3 people in my life, I mean, I don't even know. I don't even know where I would be right now. But it was great that I took those 2 coaching programs. I took them back to back right when I first started my business. And then my dad, whenever he helped me with my taxes, my first few years of business, he helped me with my taxes. And after that, he was like, "You're on your own." So in those first few years, especially, he got to see my numbers intimately, and gave me advice. And then over time, I started figuring out the rest just from stuff that he had said in the past.
That's dope. That's dope. That's dope. So how have you pivot your business, through this whole pandemic to still be profitable?
Yeah, I think that it's been interesting. I have only had one client who canceled their wedding, right? So only one person canceled their wedding. I did book some additional weddings that were very small. So I just offer micro wedding planning, but everybody else just postponed their events. So it wasn't so much lost revenue, it was more deferred revenue, which was okay for me because I always, I think that for a lot of businesses that are hurting, it's because they withdraw the money as it comes in. But when I started really getting profitable, what I started doing was, okay, if this is 2017 and you're hiring me for a wedding in 2018, I'm not going to touch that money until 2018, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so because I had been doing that for a long time, I mean, I was okay, right? And then I also was doing other things. I was also, I do have that technology background, so I've continued doing some IT consulting. So that continued to bring me revenue during that time as well. And then I also started my coaching program, to be honest, was less about trying to make up. It actually had nothing to do with trying to make up lost revenue because I didn't really have lost revenue. It was more deferred. Some of it was deferred. Some of it I had because I had the deposits. It was more because I had the time. The real reason that I hadn't really formalized my coaching program was because I just didn't have the time. But with COVID, being home all the time, and I've never been someone who watches a whole lot of TV, I just had more time. So I actually invested in myself, and I spent well over $20,000 in coaching in myself last year, and learned a lot, restructured a lot. I started learning all the things I had been doing in the past in coaching, why it wasn't working, why people weren't getting people were getting results, but how I could get people more results and work with more people without burning myself out. Like I started learning a lot. It was very valuable coaching that I got for myself. And then I relaunched my coaching program. So that's been good. That's been something. And my coaching program, I mean, when I relaunched it was in December for it to start in January. So it's new, but it's already, people are already getting great results already. They are booking weddings at more money than were even in the past, even before the pandemic. So it's really like it's been good. And it was less, while it was something that came during COVID, it was more of an opportunity a little bit because I had more time versus it being something where I was just like, oh man, I need to make more money. Like it wasn't like, oh my God, I lost money. So now I got to pivot because I lost money. It was more like, wow, I finally have time to do this thing. So let me do it. And so that was more, that's like my COVID baby, but it's not just a COVID baby. It's something I've always wanted to do. And I think that now, like I'm very fulfilled in doing it and continuing to grow it.
Okay. So in the future, are you gonna still doing both the business coaching and the wedding planner, or are you gonna try to stick to one?
I'm going to continue doing both. I think that for me, at least for right now, I mean, I think what makes me a great coach for wedding planners is the fact that I continue to plan weddings. So I'm not out of touch with what's going on because the thing is with weddings is that trends, they move very fast. So I don't want to be teaching you about the way I was doing stuff in 2015 in 2021. So I think that that's a big part of my edge. And I want to be good at it. I don't want to just take people's money. Like I actually want to be good at it and I want to be relevant. So I would say, I mean, I don't see myself, I see myself planning weddings for probably maybe the next 8 to 10 years at least, possibly longer, but at least for that long. I don't really see myself dipping out of wedding planning anytime before then. And even, yeah, I just don't see it. So I want to do both, but I do, and even independent of me starting this coaching program, over the years, I've continued to want to do fewer weddings per year, just for different reasons. So yeah, if I'm doing like eight weddings a year, hopefully. I always say I want to do 10 or 12, and I always end up doing more. But if I get to doing 8 weddings a year and then dedicate the rest of my time to coaching, then that makes me happy. That's a good thing. This year is definitely not going to happen. I already have a lot of weddings this year, but maybe in 2022 or 2023, I can get down to like 8 weddings a year, and then focus on the coaching for the rest of it. So definitely the two together at least is what I want to do for now. And if I was to stop wedding planning, I probably would only coach wedding planners in the way I'm doing it now for just a year or two more. Because like I said, everything continues to evolve and change. And at that point, I would probably pivot into something completely different.
Makes sense. What makes a great wedding planner?
A good wedding planner is organized. They plan in advance, right? You can't be figuring stuff out on the day of. That's the big mistake most people do. They're like, oh, we'll figure it out that day. And then it's just chaos. And you're level-headed. So even when there's chaos, you can stay calm, because the problem is that, not the problem, but a wedding planner is a project manager and a wedding planner is a leader. And a lot of people don't understand those things. So when people look at you, like I've done weddings in the past where everything was under control, but I was looking crazy. Like my hair was barely brushed. Like I was running around frantic, and I just felt like, oh, I'm behind the scenes, it doesn't matter. But then when the bride saw me, she was stressed just because my face looked stressed. Wow. And just because so it's like, I have to look like I'm under control. Like not even just look like it, I have to just be under control, because my energy affects everything. Even when things are going wrong, if I'm calm, everybody else is calm, and then we can think straight and fix it. Versus me being like, and there's some people where everything is going smoothly, but they're going crazy. Like that is all that's going to do is stress everybody out. So that's a big thing that I think is underappreciated by a lot of wedding planners and event planners. And you also have to you have to be able to learn from and iterate, right? Because I continue to learn things even now. Even though I've been doing it all the time, whenever I do an event and I'm like, I should have thought about that, like I did a tasting with a caterer that's not Nigerian, but they're like, oh yeah, we've done Nigerian events, we've made jollof rice, whatever. And when we tasted the rice, I was like, there's ginger in this rice, ginger is not in jollof rice. And they were like, we've made it like this in the past and no one complained. And I was just like, okay, next time somebody tells me, because I've had this exact situation before where they always say, oh yeah, we've made jollof rice in the past. And when we taste it tastes fine, right? So I'm like, next time I'm going to ask the chef for his recipe ahead of time, just so that if there's anything, because I know how to make jollof rice, right? So if I start seeing stuff like ginger and coriander and all this stuff, then I can tell them, can you just use Maggi cubes and salts? So I can just tell them before the tasting. Now, this isn't anything that anybody blame me for or whatever. That's the whole purpose of a tasting, is to taste it and give feedback, right? So they can fix it. But it's just something that I learned. And I think that the reason a lot of wedding planners get stuck, and the reason a lot of wedding planners they're like, oh, I'm so tired, I'm so stressed. Like I work 12-hour days. Honestly, I don't think you need to work 12-hour days constantly as a wedding planner. Now, if it's a day of a wedding, you're going to be working probably 20 hours on the day of the wedding. But on a regular basis, it shouldn't take that, especially if you're doing like 10 weddings a year. Something's not right. And what's probably not right is the fact that you're not learning. So you're continuing to run into the same problems over and over again. And you're just running and just putting out fires all the time instead of just doing things in a more streamlined way. And so you have to be able to, and I think that's any business owner, like you have to have critical thinking skills. You have to. If you cannot critically think, you're not going to get better. So I think that's definitely a big thing as well.
That's dope. One thing I realized that you said a lot is about how you invest. It's a different thing whether it went well and went right. How important is it for people to invest in themselves and take the risk and not be scared what happens?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's critical. I think that when it makes me think of like college, right? Like we all invest in college. Now, the thing about college, not all, some people don't go to college, and I know this may sound weird because a lot of Africans would disagree, but it's actually okay to not go to college, right? I would like my kids to go to college because I think it's an experience, but a lot of people think college is it. That's all the education that you need. And that is where the problem lies, because it's not. That's why even after going to college, they don't care where you went to school. When you join a job, they're still going to train you on how they do things there. And you're going to learn a lot there. If you're paying attention, you will learn a lot from wherever you work. And so for me, I think it's everything. I think that a willingness to learn all the time is what makes you smart. It's not thinking that you know everything, but having that willingness to always learn is literally the thing that makes you smart and is what's going to make you excel. So I think that it's critical. And yeah, investing is important. I wouldn't invest like, oh, if you're choosing between rent and investing in this program, I'll probably choose rent, so that probably goes back to your own financial habits and making sure that you have savings, make sure you have a cushion, make sure you're not living above your means, being straight out of college, buying a BMW. If you do those sorts of things, you're not going to, even if you pay your bills every month or whatever, you're probably not going to have a lot left over to do other things and to try other things. So, yeah, that's getting more into financial habits. So but I think it's very important to invest. Now, obviously, like I said, last year I spent over 20K in coaching. I've never spent that kind of money, especially on coaching. And it was a big decision, but it was just like, what I want is a major shift in the way I'm coaching. And it wasn't something I just tossed out there. Like in the past, I have definitely, when I first started my business, being desperate. When you make decisions out of desperation, it's always going to be a bad decision. So I was like desperate to start my business. So I invested in stuff without really researching people just because they sounded good on the phone. So that was dumb, right? But I mean, you do dumb stuff when you're young. That was just dumb. But now that I'm older, I will research things. I look at reviews. I look at what other people are saying. I listen to testimonials. I listen to everything. Like, I understood this was coaching. They're not going to do it for me. They're just going to tell me how I can do it. So I still have to do the work. Do I have the time to do the work? Right. And so I really thought about it. And I also, of course, prayed about it. And I felt peace about it. Because at first I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not spending $20,000 on nothing. That's crazy. But when I prayed about it, I felt like God was like, do you think that if you put in the work that you could get these results? And I was like, well, yeah. So then I let go of the money. So I don't believe everything should be knee jerk. A lot of times people want to, as long as you're not making the decision out of desperation, it's fine. As long as you are thinking it through, as long as you are being logical about it, and of course praying about it, then yes, it's fine.
So what is a typical day like for you? As a wedding planner, coach, like how do you schedule yourself?
So I coach. My coaching is group coaching for the most part. I do one-on-one VIP days sometimes, but it's a lot more than my group coaching program. So my group coaching program is my main thing. We have coaching for about 90 minutes every Thursday evening. So that's dedicated to that. I spend a lot of time. I build new resources for them, usually once a week, once every other week or so. So that usually takes me about 3 to 4 hours between like getting my thoughts down on paper. I mean, I'm always thinking about thoughts. I have like some notes that I keep like in Google Drive and in my phone, where sometimes I'm like, ooh, I need to teach them this, and I'll drop it. And so that's why I keep coming up with more content. But for me to actually sit down and do it, it usually takes me about an hour and a half to 2 hours to actually build the content, and then like another hour to like record it and upload it and all of that. So I'm probably spending maybe like 4 to 6 hours, maybe, I don't know, a week in creating content, and then another hour and a half on actually like the coaching. And then I also do one-on-one critiques of their work. So I probably spend about an hour or two every week reviewing people's work and then recording a critique for them and sending it to them. So I probably spend maybe 10 hours a week, 10 to 12 hours a week on the coaching. Now for wedding planning, I spend, it really depends on the day. With COVID, it's been very different. Like I've had to reschedule a couple of weddings that were pretty much completely planned. Yeah. So those weddings don't keep me that busy because they were pretty much planned, right? But I would say I probably am in client meetings, maybe like with clients that are already booked me, maybe for like 4 or 5 hours a week. And then I'm in meetings with clients who are considering my services, usually for about 2 to 3 hours a week, where I explain what we do, answer their questions, all that. and then just bookkeeping and stuff like that. So I would say my wedding planning business during the week probably takes me another maybe like 10 or 12 hours. Now on weekends, if I have a wedding, it's like my whole day. So I'm usually working at least 16 hours on that day of the wedding. Yeah, so that's just like an estimate, but it goes up and down. It just depends on what the demands are.
So the other question I have is, how can someone be part of your program? Is there a requirement to be part of your program, or how can they get involved in your program?
Yeah, so my program is called Planners Who Profit. So it's an accelerator program. It's 3 months for planners who are looking to make more in their business and all of that. So you can learn more about it. The website is plannerswhoprofit.com. I also have a Facebook group. It's free. It's 100% free. Excuse me, where I occasionally do trainings, just free trainings, free tips, and it's just a community of wedding planners. So you can find out about that, and you can find out pretty much about anything that I'm doing at any given point on my website, which is feyisola.com. So just FEYISOLA.com. There's a tab that says work with me, and you can find out all the different ways that you can stay connected with me. But yeah, my main program is Planners Who Profit. But then, for anyone who's just like, oh, I just want to stay connected, but I'm not sure if I want to join, or I'm not even a planner, but I just want to stay connected and see how things are going. You can kind of find out about other ways to just stay connected. You stay on my newsletter. I do share tips. I share monthly recaps once a month, just about everything I've done that month, and just ways that, just to inspire people and help people with, building their own processes and stuff like that. So yeah, you can pretty much find out anything about me or what I'm working on at the moment at feyisola.com.
Okay. And one last question: where do you see yourself in 5 years from now?
In 5 years from now, I see myself. In 5 years from now, I see myself married, 2 kids. I see myself primarily focused on my coaching, but still planning events, but primarily focused on coaching. I definitely see myself living a somewhat flexible lifestyle, spending a lot of time in Nigeria, but also here as well. Those would probably be the main things that I see myself in the next 5 years. I mean, I'm happy in the wedding industry, so I don't see myself leaving the wedding industry. So a lot of it will probably be the same. But yeah, definitely like more personal things. And I definitely see the coaching business being like, because right now it's like my wedding planning business is kind of like the main, and then my coaching business is growing. But I think at that point I would see my coaching business being like almost the main, and then my wedding planning is like select clients, just a few select clients a year. So.
All right. But thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. Can you close the house with like a word for those who are listening, where they can find you?
Yeah, I would say, and thanks again for remembering me, for having me. I mean, this has been great. I would say a word that I would have for everybody, like it's just something that I always think about, is it's a question that God asked Moses, what is in your hand? And that's something that I always ask myself all the time, whenever I feel stuck, whenever I don't know what to do next, what is in your hand? Even like, and what Moses had in his hand was a staff. And that staff is what he used to part the Red Sea. It's what he turned into a serpent. It's what he used to do a lot of miracles, right? But he didn't realize that staff was going to do all those things. But when he asked God, how am I going to do this? God asked him, what's in your hand? Similarly, there was a prophet, Elijah, and there was a woman who's like, oh, I'm going to die. And I don't have any money. I don't have anything. And the prophet asked her, what do you have in your house? And she said, well, I don't have anything. And she said, well, except for this one small jar of oil. Yeah. And the prophet told her, okay, take that jar of oil, borrow vessels. And she kept pouring until she filled out every vessel that she borrowed. And the oil didn't stop until she ran out of vessels. And so whenever I think about those stories, I'm reminded that a lot of times we're sitting and we're waiting for God to put things in our hands. But a lot of times God is asking us, what do you have in your hand right now? When I started my business, I never wanted to be, not that it's a bad thing, but I never wanted to exclusively do Nigerian weddings. But what I had in my hand was I had just won a Nigerian beauty pageant, and I'm always invited to all these Nigerian events. So that was what I started with. I started with Nigerian fundraisers. I started with Nigerian things, and I still love doing Nigerian events. I don't think I'll ever stop, but what I wanted was to do international events. And now I'm there. right? But it started with what was in my hand. And a lot of times we don't pay enough attention with what's in our hand. So my word for everybody would be to really be honest and look at what is in your hand. Look at what you have available to you, and make use of it. Like I said, I got a lot of financial advice from my dad. He was already there, you know. The person that I ended up hiring as a life coach is somebody that I already knew, someone that I was just going to mastermind meetings with. I didn't even know, I wasn't even thinking about starting a business, but I was just hanging out with people who had businesses and who were way older than me. And over time, all those things that I had in my hand ended up producing fruit in my life. So we have to take inventory of what's in our hand at all times and not underestimate it, and know that every problem has a solution. And of course, God is the one who knows the solution. And many times that solution is going to be using something that we already had in our hands. So combining the knowledge from God, asking God for permission, asking God for clarity, and also not being afraid to use what we have in our hands to move forward, because that is literally the cheat code to getting ahead, is use whatever you have in your hands to get to the next step. That's what everybody does. So that would be my word. And again, you can stay connected with me, feyisola.com. But yeah, for sure, that would be my word.
Thank you for being here, Feyisola. It's a pleasure having you to my wedding planner, and so much luck in your business.
Thank you.